Victory is fleeting, but farewells linger forever. After ending Inter Milan's 45-year wait for European glory, José Mourinho's final act was not on the pitch. It was in the streets of Madrid. Stepping out of his car, he hugged Marco Materazzi, both men in tears. But we'll get to that emotional goodbye later, because this story is about a journey like no other. Let's rewind to the time when Mourinho arrived in the summer of 2008, where Inter hadn't won the Champions League since 1965. Let that sink in. Over 4 decades of waiting, while their city rivals AC Milan had been busy racking up European titles, becoming the most successful club in the world by 2008. For Inter fans, every year of European failure hurt more than the last. Domestic dominance under Roberto Mancini had done little to soothe the pain of repeated last 16 exits in the Champions League. But Mourinho wasn't there to maintain the status quo. He had bigger plans, and when he spoke to the club's board, he made it clear, winning the league, that's a given, but Europe is where we dream big. The man was a disruptor, and he promised a step-by-step plan to deliver the one trophy that Inter craved most, the Champions League. Unlike most managers who walk into a club and demand wholesale changes, Mourinho's first step was to evaluate what he had. No massive overhaul, no panic buys, just surgical precision. His signings that summer reflected the same calculated approach. Sulley Muntari came in, fresh off Portsmouth's miracle FA Cup win, bringing speed and muscle to the midfield. Amantino Mancini was added to inject creativity and goals. And then there was the gamble. Ricardo Quaresma, once touted as the next big thing in Portuguese football. Mourinho risked big on him, and while the move didn't fully pan out, it showcased his belief in calculated risks. However, one thing haunted Mourinho that season. He had desperately wanted Frank Lampard, his golden boy from Chelsea. The deal was practically done, but Lampard decided to stay in London after his mother's tragic passing. For Mourinho, this was one of the biggest disappointments of his career, but he didn't dwell on it. He was building for something greater. That first season wasn't about winning the Champions League, it was about learning. Mourinho wanted to test his squad under pressure, to figure out who could handle the biggest stage and where the weaknesses lay. By the end of the season, he had his blueprint. He'd taken notes, observed the cracks, and knew exactly what pieces were missing to conquer Europe. If you think Mourinho's Inter Milan was the football equivalent of assembling a retirement home, well, you're not entirely wrong. The age factor stood out like a sore thumb, and it wasn't just the fans who noticed. Let's break it down. In the next season, the defense was a wall of experience, or let's be honest, old-timers. Ivan Cordoba, 32. Walter Samuel, 31st. Marco Materazzi and Captain Javier Zanetti, both 35. Sure, they had experience for days, but legs, not so much. Most of the midfielders were pushing or had already crossed the 30-year mark. Dejan Stankovic was close to 30, Esteban Cambiaso was hanging in there, and then there was Luis Figo, the footballing legend himself, still going strong at 36. And up front, Zlatan Ibrahimovic was a rare youthful exception at 27. But when he wasn't on the pitch, things got a little unconventional. The secondary striker role was a weird mix. Hernan Crespo at 33, Julio Cruz at 34, and then, out of nowhere, 18-year-old Mario Balotelli. Mourinho often praised experience over youth, but Inter's aging squad faced real challenges. In the Champions League, they fielded one of the oldest starting acts-ins, and it showed. Fitness issues, injuries, and a lack of centre-backs became recurring problems. Over-reliance on Zlatan for goals didn't help, as they barely survived the group stage and exited to Manchester United in the round of 16. Mourinho's transfers didn't shine either. Adriano departed amidst personal struggles, Quaresma flopped as the worst signing of the year, and Mancini faded to the bench. Despite breaking Serie A records, the team's age was becoming a glaring concern. But while the critics sharpened their knives, Mourinho was busy crafting his next move. Remember, this was all part of his step-by-step plan, and when Inter crashed out of the Champions League, he delivered a brutally honest report to the club. His message: "We have the best low block on the planet, but our centre-backs are slow." In Mourinho speak, that translates to, "We need speed. We need someone who can carry the ball, recover quickly, and let us press higher up the pitch." The next phase of his plan was about evolution, injecting youth and energy into this experienced squad. So while people mocked the age of his squad that year, Mourinho was already working on the blueprint for one of the greatest Champions League triumphs in history. You see, the man wasn't just managing a team, he was constructing a legacy. After that disappointing Champions League exit, he flipped the script entirely in just one summer. The first name on his list was Ricardo Carvalho. Mourinho loved him. Porto, Chelsea, and eventually Real Madrid. Carvalho was his go-to man, one of the best centre-backs in history, and also one of Mourinho's most trusted lieutenants. But there was a problem. Chelsea knew just how valuable Carvalho was to Mourinho, and they weren't letting him go. Plan A, out the window. Enter Plan B, Lucio. At first glance, Lucio wasn't a household name, not someone mentioned alongside stars like Carvalho. But Mourinho saw something others missed. Lucio was a World Cup winner with Brazil. Lucio brought speed, a crucial element Inter desperately needed at the back. And the best part, he cost just €7 million. A bargain doesn't even begin to describe it. With the defense sorted, Mourinho shifted focus to the attack, starting with the Ibrahimovic. While Ibra was brilliant, the system built around him felt restrictive. So when Guardiola and Barcelona offered Samuel Eto'o in exchange, Mourinho didn't flinch. Eto'o had a fiery reputation, but Mourinho saw untapped potential. The deal was a masterstroke. Eto'o plus €48 million. Mourinho called it the deal of the summer, even saying, "Eto'o isn't worth €1 less than Ibrahimovic." That €48 million could have gone toward a big-name signing, but Mourinho played it smart, snagging Diego Milito for €28 million. Milito wasn't flashy, but his record, a goal every 100 minutes. Mourinho called him one of the best signings ever, and history would prove him right. The final touches were in midfield. Veterans like Zanetti and Cambiasso brought strength, but Mourinho craved finesse. Enter Thiago Motta, and in a last-minute coup, Wesley Sneijder from Real Madrid for just €15 million. And then it happened. The turning point Mourinho had been waiting for. Inter was staring down elimination in the Champions League group stage, trailing Dynamo Kyiv late in the fourth match. Domestically, the narrow 4-3-1-2 formation had worked wonders, but in Europe, it was a liability. Opposing fullbacks exploited the flanks, and Inter was struggling to adapt. That night in Kyiv changed everything. With time running out, Mourinho made a bold move. He shifted to a 4-3-3, pushing Samuel Eto'o deeper to cover defensively while setting the team up to counter-attack. It was classic Mourinho, adaptation under pressure. With 4 minutes left, Diego Milito equalized. Moments later, Wesley Sneijder sealed the comeback, reigniting Inter's European campaign. But setbacks followed. A tough loss to Barcelona bruised Mourinho's ego, but Inter scraped through the group stages. By January, Mourinho fine-tuned his squad, signing Goran Pandev from Lazio. Pandev wasn't flashy, but was disciplined and selfless, perfect for the new system. The Champions League became their focus, especially after beating Chelsea in the round of 16. It was personal for Mourinho facing his former club. A win at Stamford Bridge proved it. Inter wasn't just surviving, they were thriving, Mourinho's army marching toward destiny. And then came the ultimate showdown. Inter Milan versus Barcelona. This wasn't just a Champions League semi-final. It was deeply personal. For Mourinho, this was about proving himself to the club that had dismissed him. Barcelona had called him a translator, choosing Pep Guardiola, an unproven manager, over him. Guardiola's Barcelona embodied beauty and elegance, everything Mourinho's pragmatic teams were not. But Mourinho thrives on being underestimated, and this time he had a point to prove. Before the match, Mourinho lit the fuse, famously mocking Barcelona's obsession with the Champions League. It's not a dream for them, it's an obsession. In the first leg, Inter delivered a tactical masterclass. While Barcelona dominated possession, Inter struck with ruthless counters. Diego Milito was the star, with 2 assists and a goal in a stunning 3-1 victory. The second leg at Camp Nou was a cauldron of tension. Just 27 minutes in, Thiago Motta was controversially sent off for a soft foul after Sergio Busquets' theatrical dive. Inter was reduced to 10 men with over an hour left to play. As Motta left the pitch, Mourinho stormed toward Guardiola, leaned in, and whispered with chilling confidence, "You think this is over? This is far from over." Inter's response was a testament to Mourinho's brilliance. Eto'o and Pandev dropped into deep defensive roles, while Zanetti and Cambiaso shadowed Messi relentlessly. Mourinho's mantra was clear: let them have the ball, they won't hurt us. Barcelona had 73% possession, but struggled to break through Inter's impenetrable wall. Piqué's late goal offered Barcelona hope, but Inter held firm. The final whistle signaled that Inter had knocked out the reigning champions. Mourinho erupted, sprinting across the pitch in jubilant celebration. Even as Camp Nou's sprinklers turned on to disrupt him, he remained defiant and triumphant. Later, he quipped, "I have to thank them for the sprinklers. The water washed the blood, sweat and tears my players left on that pitch. This was the greatest defeat of my life." Mourinho didn't just win the game, he won the narrative. This wasn't just revenge, it was a moment that would live forever in football lore. The final hurdle was here. It wasn't just another match, it was a master-apprentice duel, Mourinho versus Van Gaal. The mentor who once guided him now stood in his way, commanding a Bayern Munich side that was as youthful as it was dominant. On one side, Bayern boasted an energetic lineup with only 2 outfield players over 30. On the other, Inter Milan's starting 11 was the oldest ever seen in a Champions League final, averaging over 31 years. But as Mourinho would later declare, that day it took all the old men, and we won it all. The stage was set for a clash of eras, philosophies, and legacies. Diego Milito, the man of the moment, delivered a masterclass, scoring both goals in a 2-0 win that cemented his place as one of the great strikers of his generation. Wesley Sneijder, once cast aside by Real Madrid, proved his worth yet again, assisting and finishing as one of the top Ballon d'Or contenders. For Javier Zanetti, it was the crowning achievement of a 17-year career. And for Mourinho, it was vindication. The student had outsmarted the teacher, conquering Europe on his terms. As the final whistle blew, the Santiago Bernabeu erupted in a mix of cheers and tears. Inter players collapsed to the ground, overwhelmed by the weight of their triumph, while fans roared in jubilation, waving blue and black flags under the Madrid sky. But after the final whistle, Mourinho wasn't celebrating like a man who'd reached the pinnacle. He was already saying goodbye. Stepping out of his car, he embraced Marco Materazzi on the sidewalk. Materazzi, tears in his eyes, whispered he'd never forgive Mourinho for leaving. That moment, it was raw, emotional, and utterly unforgettable. True greatness often is.